Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see so many wonderful faces here for our New Member Institute. Wherever you may be, it's either good afternoon or good morning. Go ahead and turn your cameras on so we can see all your bright, shining faces. Perfect, perfect. So thank you so very, very much for joining us for this learning experience. We are as excited to be with you and to learn from you as I hope you are to be with us and to learn from us. I am ever so grateful for all the people that find their way to being State Board of Education members. As I said, I'm Paolo DeMaria. I'm the president and CEO of the National Association of State Boards of Education. We are a nonpartisan organization that is here for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to support the needs of members of state boards of education and the boards themselves. So thank you so very, very much for being part of this training session. We're going to be meeting for three-hour sessions, one today, one then in July, one in August. And in the totality of that, we hope to be able to bring to you lots of great understanding and frankly, some reflection. So let's get started. What I'd love you to do is introduce yourself two ways. First of all, if you have your name showing up on the screen, if you would be kind enough to rename yourself and include the name of your state in parentheses after your name. That way we know where you're from. That's ever so helpful to us because it gives us an idea of where people are coming from. And then in the chat box, and you'll see the chat functionality usually is at the bottom of your screen. It says chat on it. You can click on that. It'll open a little window and you can type in your name and your state. We'd love to know how long you've been a board member in number of months. For some of you, that could be fairly a short amount of time, 2 months or 3. For some of you, it might be 16 or 18 months. Maybe there's a few of you for which it will be a little bit longer than that. And then finally, we'd love to know your occupation. We know that most State Board of Education members are part-time and so have other duties and responsibilities, jobs or vocations that they pursue. We'd love to hear that from you as well. If we'd all take an opportunity to do that in the chat, I think that would be most welcome. While we're doing that, I want to point out a number of our board of directors who are here with us. Janet Cannon is the chair of our board of directors. She's going to offer some opening remarks here in a minute or two. I think I also see, let's see, who else do I see here? I see Fern Desjardins from Maine. She is our current secretary treasurer. Let's see. I see.
Woody is here.
Yes, Woody Exley from Connecticut, who is our current Northeast area director. McCall Flynn, who is the current representative on the board, National Council of State Board Executives. Let's see, and I think that might be everyone from the board of directors. We'll have some that will join us late. Great, I love what I'm seeing in the chat. Again, I would encourage more of you to enter in your name. I see we've got a student member joining us. We've got someone from the higher education community, someone from workforce strategy. Fantastic, fantastic. I always love to see educators as well. Retired superintendent, someone in the healthcare field. Perfect, perfect. One of the things we hope to do is get to learn a little bit more about each other through the course of this experience, because that's really how you build relationships. And that's what we ultimately want to have. We want to have a good enough relationship with each and every one of you that you know that you can call on us to be of service to you. And then sometimes we may call on you to be of service to us in a way that's mutually beneficial. And that's the way we work. We pride ourselves at NASBE for being a member-driven organization, and that is ever so important. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Janet Cannon. Janet is from Utah. She's a state board member in the great state of Utah and current chair of the NASBE Board of Directors. Janet, you want to offer some welcoming remarks?
I'd be happy to. I'm so delighted to be with all you new state board members today. And I want to congratulate each of you on becoming members of your state boards of education. I know some of you are appointed, a few of you may be elected. We appreciate all of you being with us. And let me further welcome you to NASBE. So NASBE is a wonderful organization committed to supporting the work of state boards, and NASBE is the premier provider of professional development for state board members. Here, you will be able to increase your expertise. You'll be able to gain confidence in the work you do at the state level. And NASBE is a wonderful place for you to begin your service as a state board member. It is an honor and a responsibility to serve on a state board, because you know the future success of students in your state rests firmly on your shoulders. The work you do is essential to ensure that the education system of your state continues to grow and improve and is a benefit to the students and families of your state. New board members really, truly want to be the very best they can be. And that's what New Board Member Institute is all about. I attended NASBE's New Board Member Institute as the first thing I did as a new state board member back in 1996. And I was there with my colleague, Stephanie Bell from Alabama. We each are now the longest serving state board members in the Western area and Southern areas of NASBE. NASBE trained us well. I remember going to that New Member Institute and really wanting to know how to get my concerns on the state board agenda for discussion. I found out and I learned a lot about strategic planning in the process. And one of the most beneficial things I learned was networking with state board members from across the country. Their expertise and knowledge was invaluable to me, and I hope that you find the same experience I did. You undoubtedly will have your own questions and concerns you want to have addressed, and you've come to the best place available for guidance and expertise. During the 3 days of the Institute, we'll talk about aspects of being a board member and a public official. I remember they gave us a little workshop on what to do when you are the news. And I've determined in 23 years that it's really best if you're not the news. But if that's the case, you need to know how to handle it, and they can help you do that. And then we have structured the experience to allow you to reflect on your strengths as well as opportunities for further learning. I hope you come away from the 3 days of Institute having experienced valuable interaction with fellow board members and learning a thing or two that will help you be the very best board member you can be. From this experience, I also hope you will become active in NASBE. Join a committee, attend office hours, listen to the webinars, attend conference, and let me put in a plug for the annual conference that will be the end of October in Phoenix, Arizona. It should be a beautiful spot, and there's nothing like interacting with state board members from across the country in person. So please put that on your calendar. And then we have a couple of new study groups that we are just forming, and we would love to have you join those and share with us your knowledge and expertise, and let us share some with you. So thank you for being here today. Thank you, Paolo, for the opportunity.
Janet, thank you so much for your leadership and your great welcoming remarks. You also see on this slide the names of the members of our staff. I'm going to ask them to wave, let people see who you are. We are a small but mighty group of dedicated staff that are here to support your needs. And over the course of today, as well as in the long term, you'll get to know them and their fantastic skills and abilities in serving and helping you meet your needs. I also wanted to share this slide, which gives you a sense of where people are coming from today. We have 29 participants representing 13 states. You see the distribution of the different states. We've got a couple of states that have quite large delegations, Maine and Arizona, and also Hawaii, others that are scattered across the country. We actually also have 3 student members and 4 state board executives. And so to me, it's always great to see that kind of widespread and diverse representation, because it always enriches our conversations when we hear what's going on in different states. Now, before we dive into the substance, I want to point out a couple of housekeeping items. The first one is mute your microphone when it's not in use. That way we can avoid any kind of unnecessary feedback. We'd love for you to keep your video on unless you have some sort of bandwidth issues. From time to time, we'll ask you to raise your hand. And so for those of you who are not familiar with the hand raising feature here in Zoom, it's usually, again, at the bottom of your screen under the reactions. If you click on that, you will see a number of things pop up, one of which will be raise your hand. That's what you should use to accomplish that particular response. Go ahead and use the chat box. We value your feedback and your input. This is meant to be an interactive experience, and we know sometimes that's not always easy. I know that I will not personally be monitoring the chat function, but I have staff members who will be doing that. And so as questions are raised, they will sort of be the ones that will bring up the questions that you have. If you feel like you're not, you're not being heard, you're being ignored, we're a small enough group that you should just unmute yourself and say, excuse me, I have a question, and you'll be recognized and we'll move forward. We pride ourselves on not being overly formal in the context of NASBE. And so that's how we'll conduct ourselves for today. The thing is, we are using a little worksheet. This worksheet, which hopefully you received, and I hope you have either a printed copy or a version that you can use to take notes on, because the point is to help this to be a reflective experience for you. That way you think about your role as a member on your state board of education, what your understandings are about the work of your board, what your own abilities are, what some improvement opportunities might be, what are those areas that you might want to learn more in the future about. And this worksheet is really intended help guide that part of the experience today. There are 11 prompts, and over the course of the next 3 hours, we'll touch on each of those prompts and give you an opportunity to reflect, and then in some cases to share out. Very good. With that, let's go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about today's agenda. Basically, when we think about state boards of education, we think about it in 3 ways. First of all, it's the who. And the who is divided into me as an individual board member, we as the collective of the board, and what I call the ecology, the space in which the board and individual board members operate. So we're going to talk about the who first. Then we're going to talk about the what. Those are the things that state boards do. And typically there are both those activities as well as the more substantive things that are policy driven or practice driven. That constitutes the what. And then finally, it's the how. How do you actually do that work? How do you lead a meaningful results-driven policy agenda? And then we're going to end the session with some area breakouts. You'll be given instructions to break out into rooms based on one of our 4 areas, and you'll have NASBE staff members who will walk you through a little bit more information about NASBE itself, talk about some of our opportunities, and if there's time, give you an ability to share some of your key takeaways from today's experience. So let's dive in. Let's start with the who. And again, as I said, there's really 3 aspects of the who. There's the me, who we are as individuals. There's the we, who we are as a collective. And then the ecology. I use this picture of a major city as part of the ecology, because as you know, a major city has roadways and sewer systems and electrical grids and neighborhoods and commercial districts and businesses, and they all have to interact in order to contribute to the quality of life of that particular city. And in many ways, what we do in education has similar aspects, and that's why I call it the ecology. But we're not going to start there. We're going to start with the me. I'm going to play this little video for you. It's one of the very first question on your worksheet speaks to this video, and it asks you to listen carefully and then reflect a little bit about how it applies to you.
How do I know? A lot of people, when they think of the phrase, how do I know, they always want to put the what behind it. How do I know what I'm supposed to do? The question that you really should ask is, how do I know why I'm here? Because when you know your why, your what becomes more clear and more impactful. If you know, like for instance, people know that I do comedy, but that's what I do. My why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. So I can do comedy, I can write books, I can be in a movie, because all of it is motivated by my why. In fact, I have a new web series out called Michael Jr. Break Time. We probably just did the 6th episode. It's on YouTube. So every single Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode on YouTube of Michael Jr. Break Time. What it is it's me. I travel around the country and I do stand-up comedy, in case you didn't know. And in the middle of my comedy set sometime, I'll stop and just talk to my audience. And we've been filming this, and it's pretty cool. So we're in Winston-Salem. I'm gonna show you a clip from Winston-Salem. And I'm just talking to this guy in the audience, and he tells me that he's a musical instructor at a school. So I was like, all right, you're a musical instructor, can you sing? Let me hear you sing a song. So this is what happened at the last episode of Michael Jr.'s Break Time. Check it. So you're a musical director. Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Wow. That bro could sing. Know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now, right now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. Let's go. Now. Okay. Here's what I want you to catch. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what becomes more impactful because you're walking towards or in your purpose.
So take a minute to reflect on that. What is your why? Did you see the difference, the amount of passion, the amount of energy, and the energy that he developed among the others around him when the way he, what he did was influenced by his own personal why? Take a minute to jot a sense of what your why is. Why do you find yourself at this particular point in time as part of a state board of education? What are the kinds of things that fill you with passion, that motivate you to be a strong member and to make a difference for the students in your particular state? And would anybody like to share? Don't hesitate, just unmute yourself and chime in.
This is Jenny Clark from Arizona. I'll chime in really fast.
Great.
Partially because I am one of those people who has a hard time listening to awkward silences for too long.
That's why we like you, Jenny.
Yeah. So obviously that video is like, oh, I can think of my why right now. So I have 5 children, and 2 of them we didn't discover until our oldest were 6 and 8, that they had dyslexia. So, we went through that massive process of evaluations and IEPs and fighting and valuations and coming back. you know, to get to this place where it was like, oh, not only do we learn years later that the process shouldn't have gone how the process went, which so many special needs families could tell you, but we also started realizing, wow, how crazy is it that, you know, none of these fantastic schools in our state actually offer the services that our children need to learn how to read. We ended up having to do something outside of the school system to teach them how to read. So, you know, fast forward years later, and now I'm on the Arizona State Board of Education. That's very much in the back of my mind when, you know, not annoyingly so, but when I look at our reading scores in Arizona and I'm in meetings and everyone's talking about things, you know, my questions and my instinct is, what's that going to do for the reading rates in Arizona? How is that going to help our kids learn how to read? 30% of Arizona kids can only read at grade level, and that's a lot of my why.
Jenny, great. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Anybody else want to share? What inspires you? What's your passion?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Jackie Clay. I'm the County Superintendent of Schools for Cochise County, also from Arizona.
Sure.
My why is that as an educator, and just as my personality, I am a natural reconciler or repairer of the breach. I see people, they have different ways of seeing things. And the problem is if one side argues and the other side argues, if one side wins, everybody loses. So both sides have to be able to listen to each other and find that common ground, especially in education. And we have so many groups. We are so siloed. And sometimes with groups, they just demand, this is what I want. And again, I've been in the military 25 years before I became an educator and before I became on the board. And my calling, I feel, is to get people, first of all, to listen to each other, okay? Because we all have the same goals. We just want to get there differently. And when we're so concentrated on my way is the right way, somebody's going to lose, somebody's going to get hurt, and we're not going to be able to move forward to sustainability. Hate to sound like I'm preaching, but that has been my life. That is who I am. So when I was asked to be on this, I knew why. I knew why I was selected, because that's my reputation of listening and trying to be a peacemaker between people.
Perfect. We need those. It's almost like you got access to some of my slides later on in the presentation. All right, let's we're going to now use your hand raising feature, because the other aspect of the me is the different identities that we each bring to the table as far as our board service. And so I'm going to list a couple of things. I'm going to say a particular category, and if you're a member of that category, then raise your hand so we can see who all is part of that category. Okay, the first category is, are you elected? Are you elected? If you are, raise your hand. All right. Not too many, not too many. It's important to understand who are the elected members. Some states don't have any elected members. Other states have all elected, and some states have hybrid. And they bring with them a special perspective in terms of what they are there to accomplish. All right, put your hands down. How many of you are parents? Parents. Nice, a good number of you. And that's in some ways only to be expected. Also recognizing that it's okay if you're not parents. Okay, hands down. How many of you are in the education community? You're either educators, teachers, superintendents, that your work, your vocation is in education. And again, we find this fairly common on state boards of education. People who are either current teachers or former teachers, superintendents, have held other positions in school districts. Not too many in this group, but a good number, good representative number. Okay, hands down. How many of you are business people? You either run a business or you're part of a business that's, again, not government sector, not in education. Maybe you are in manufacturing, or you're in healthcare, or you're in some other business aspect. Again, a great voice to have on a board of education, because ultimately business people tend to bring that voice of workforce development and, what are the needs of the business community and the economy for the skills that students bring to the table. Okay, hands down. How many of you, we just heard a singer, how many of you play a musical instrument? I always think that's an interesting thing, because when you play a musical instrument, especially in an ensemble, it teaches you to listen to each other, to get along, to find ways to create shared harmony. Musical instrument players, not too many today, not too many. All right, hands down. What about how many of you have played a team sport? Again, another great way to learn how to get along, how to work as a group, how to come on time, do your homework, be ready, be prepared. Yeah, there's a lot more hands there. Our team sports players. Great. Okay, hands down. How many of you are first generation American? First generation American. That's one I get to raise my hand on. Not too many of us here. Very good, very good. Hands down. How many of you have lost a loved one in the last year? Lost a loved one in the last year. Now, as you think about, okay, great, hands down. As you think about this exercise, hopefully the point I'm trying to make is, as an individual, you bring all the different aspects of your identity to the table. Jenny told us a beautiful part of her identity was this experience about her own children. And each of us has not only that piece of their identity, but those experiences, their lived experiences in life that give them a richness that they bring to the table of the state board. And that ultimately allows them to make a difference and be part of that collective policymaking, decision-making, strategic planning aspect. Very good. I'm going to go back to the slides. Let's see here. All right, so that concludes the me section, And now we're going to make that leap from the me to the we, because at the end of the day, a state board is a we, and the state board has to lead collectively. And so again, you should have in your on your worksheet another video, and this is going to help illustrate this particular point of the presentation. Let me see if I can get it to play here. I'm going to advance it a little bit so we don't have to listen to all of it. We'll go right here.
Melodies. I play piano whenever I can. I'm a bit obsessed. It's a totally new arrangement that my friend Helen's put together.
It's amazing.
So I'm a bit nervous about it.
I bet you are.
I don't get to play piano in public very often. This means a lot. I'm going to give it my all today and hope I can impress the judges and the public. Let's do it.
Right, the stage is yours. Grab it.
Thanks.
So reflect on that a little bit on your worksheet. What happened? What happened that demonstrates the difference between the individual and the collective? And what is that difference? Who wants to share their observations? Was it better? Was it better when there was a collective?
Hi, this is Jackie.
Go ahead, Jackie.
What I got out of that was that we all work independently, but we are interdependent upon each other to move forward westward.
And so how does that interdependence manifest itself? What does the group have in common, perhaps?
It's Jackie again.
Yeah,
I would say the goal. The goal.
Yeah,
The goal
yeah.
is always, the goal, no matter what that is always, usually always common. It's just that we're different. We take different places or different parts to get to that goal. And we all celebrate each other's part moving forward.
Lauren, do you want to chime in?
Hi, this is Lauren. I also was thinking ahead to the school board part of it, that we come, some of us, from big places, little places, different cultures. And just as you had some people there as musicians with a classical background or a rock background or all different instruments, like
Right.
Jackie said, they shared a common goal, but they were expressing it and manifesting it in different ways. And then you can also look at it, as Jackie did, by the collective being maybe stronger and richer with those different views, but nonetheless, that's still that independence that suits the individual's gifts and talents or the needs of their place.
Right. You certainly got the sense that everybody felt like they were contributing, right? I mean, they were joyful. They understood that in the collective, they could create a much more beautiful, a much more impactful thing than maybe they could, especially if you know music. If you have, the cello line and the cello line alone, it could be pretty boring. But when it's combined with those trumpets and the flutes and the violins and the, and the piano, it really, creates an experience that is so much stronger than any individual person can make. The other thing is they're all working off of the same, for those of you in music, there's a score, right? There's a score that outlines sort of the objective, right? What is this song supposed to sound like, so that each individual is always in tune? Now, we also noticed there was that guy on the stage with the beard. Like, what was he doing? What was his purpose?
Served as the conductor.
Right. Was that you, Nikki?
Yes, I was just going to say that he was the leader. So, I mean, my whole view of the thing was, I saw it as getting all stakeholders involved or engaged. You brought in each so that they be heard individually and then collectively to accomplish this task. And of course, our conductor was the leader who helped guide it all.
Right. And he didn't play too overwhelming a role, but he kept time so that people could be together. And sometimes maybe it's your board chair. It may be somebody else that is the one that kind of keeps corralling. Again, as Jackie said, sometimes it's to build that consensus. During rehearsal, he might say, look, you trumpets are too loud, or I need to hear more from the violins. They weigh in to sort of help ensure that that collective voice is really as powerful and beautiful as it can be. Great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more, because this idea of individual leadership and translating that into collective leadership is really all about that idea of working together, listening to each other, understanding each other, and understanding that when you are in a position where you can express the collective voice, you can really have a powerful impact. And the challenge, the opposite part is, if everybody is still holding on to their individual leadership and role, and you simply hear multiple leadership voices. Imagine if all those instruments were just playing their own favorite, piece, and not really coordinated, not really working together, not really listening to each other. it's sort of chaotic. It's sort of a cacophony because everybody says, well, hey, I'm a great flautist, or I'm a great cello player, and I'm going to play this concerto or that piece or what have you. And it all gets muddled and confused, and you don't really get a sense of what things are about. You don't have that collective leadership when everybody is sort of staking out their own ground and saying, here is who I am. Ultimately, when the individual leader melds into the collective leadership, and people purposely say, let's work together and amplify the voice that we share as a collective, that can be really impactful. Now, we also recognize that, sometimes individual voices are going to continue to be important. You saw that guitar player. He was sort of featured as a soloist. His instrument stood out for a period of time. Sometimes that's going to be the way things are as part of the board work as well, and could even make a contribution to the leadership and the collective leadership voice. But he still was in line with the framing of the score and the chord progressions and so forth and so on. So I have asked Patty Goebbels. Patty is on the Nebraska State Board of Education. And I reached out to some of our board members and I said, is somebody out there that can speak to the collective voice? Patty said, yes, I'd love to speak to the collective voice, both in terms of when it works and comes together and when it might sometimes be challenging. Patty, do you want to share your reflections?
Sure. Thanks, Paolo. Collective voice, I think, is essential to the work of any state board and certainly to the Nebraska State Board of Education. And as Jackie and Paolo, you have both mentioned, as individual board members, we all bring our own experiences, our own perspectives, and our own concerns to the board table. But collective voice really honors and respects and calls for individual members to be heard, for people to have an appreciation of different perspectives and to really have an understanding. And it's much more likely that boards will coalesce and speak with one voice when they have been heard. Unfortunately, as a board member, I've been in situations where people have not been willing to give up their individual ideas for the betterment of the whole. And I really think that in collective voice, there's power because collective voice signals unity. And what I've seen from my own experience is when you have collective voice, your board becomes much more credible. Your board has a much more public sense of trust, and your board can operate effectively and efficiently. And when you don't have those things, you have a dysfunctional board. I kind of talk about what's called destructive dissent. Dissent's important, but when you have continuous dissent and it's destructive, you really can't have an effective board. Our state board has taken a lot of measures or tried to do lots of things to build the collective voice. For example, we developed what I would call working agreements, rules to live by as board members, things such as being present, really listening to and appreciating individual board member perspectives. We also have structured social events because I think part of working collectively is building relationships with each other so that you really know that there's a sense of connectedness and you're not an individual alone, that you have many commonalities with other people on your board. We hired a consultant to help us learn how to communicate effectively, how to collaborate, and how to build consensus. We've tried to provide what I would call forums for individual voice through both board work sessions as well as through a committee structure. We have started trying to anticipate and prepare board members, especially when there are potentially contentious issues that we're going to have to address. So really providing board members ahead of board meetings with lots of data, with giving them opportunities to start think about possible solutions, to get them away from their own solution to maybe that there are alternative solutions. And finally, we've really tried starting to focus on solving problems, coming up with solutions rather than perpetuating problems. We're a work in progress, but I think we are making strides in terms of starting to work more collectively and to speak with one voice as a board.
Perfect, perfect. Patty, thank you so much for sharing those reflections. Patty is also our new member representative. So when she went through the New Member Institute last year, she was elected by her new member peers to be the new member representative on our NASBE Board of Directors. And you all will do the same thing at our as part of the 3 meetings that we're going to have together. Ultimately, at the end of the day, your voice matters, your point of view matters, your perspective matters, your willingness to engage in the collective leadership process matters, and that is fundamentally what is important. One of the things, and I'm ending this part of the presentation with this idea, and I think it was brought out by Jackie in terms of this idea that sometimes there are these high-level aspirations that unite us, right? And I find that when you ask people, like, what are you really about? There's usually this consensus that, we want a great education system for our kids. And if you can find that sort of high-level unifying, this is a sentence from the Mississippi Strategic Plan that I think kind of grabs that. There's no one on the Mississippi board that wouldn't agree with this, even though they might disagree with the how do we get here? This idea that we're going to work together to create this world-class education system is something that they bring to the table, and that forms that unifying anchor that allows a collective voice to be represented. All right. Now I'm going to transition into the last of the 3 pieces of the who, and that's ecology. Again, you have a place on your worksheet, and everyone is going to be a little bit different in how their ecology looks like. So pay careful attention and think to yourself about, how does this look in my particular setting, in my particular state? Me, I'm always going to put the State Board of Education in the middle, but the State Board of Education doesn't work alone, and it doesn't stand alone. It's part of an ecosystem that helps support the education system. Another key part of that ecosystem is usually the state superintendent, the state commissioner, whatever it's called in your state. Sometimes that superintendent is appointed by the board. Sometimes that person is elected or appointed by the governor. And there's always the Department of Education that also plays a role in this, okay? And so here you have now 3 players. But we also know that there are others that ultimately are key to this, and that's all the districts and the schools, private schools, charter schools, whatever your mix of the ultimate delivery entities of education services. That's also an important part of this ecosystem, right? But then there are other players. There isn't a governor or lieutenant governor that hasn't espoused something in favor of education as part of their State of the State speech, as part of their platform, because education is so fundamental and of such high level interest. Governors and lieutenant governors play a role. They might actually appoint the superintendent. They might appoint some of the members or all of the members of the State Board of Education. They will have different roles. And you also have the legislature that takes pride in being able to pass laws that impact education, and that sometimes even can prescribe the roles of the state board or limit the roles of the state board in the work that they do. And then you have a whole host of other entities. You have other state agencies, other partners in the state that have an interest in what's happening in education. You have various associations, whether they be of teachers or superintendents, school counselors, school psychologists, school nurses, a whole host of entities that have an interest in one aspect or another of the education system. And then you have all the sort of stakeholders, whether it's students, parents, taxpayers, citizens, community members, the media, and others that weigh in and have an interest in the way the education system functions and ultimately what its outcomes are. And all these people are sort of interacting with each other and trying to influence the process and play in this sandbox with sometimes a shared goal of making the system better, but again, with different points of view about what better looks like. And then finally, you have the federal government that is sort of, an entity and a force that's there. It sometimes doesn't have all that much formal authority, but it has informal authority through its funding support, which also gives it a certain amount of power. Sometimes it does have formal authority, whether it's through different acts of the federal government, and they play an important part of the ecosystem too. And so now, if you look at that state board bubble, it's now in the midst of this of this, clutter of interests and activity, but all of it, again, is directed towards how do we make the education system a great one in the interest of our students. And it also begs, how does a state board manage within the context of all these players in order to effectively do its work and be part of that policymaking and practice delivery approach to the education system? So hopefully you will write in your notes there, where things are. Maybe you're appointed by the governor, or maybe the legislature plays a role in your appointment, or the legislature is working on some legislation right now that's going to impact what you're able to do, or how do you have relationships with the different players in this diagram, and what does that all mean? Because ultimately, the best way, and this goes again back to a comment that was made earlier, is when people are kind of on the same page working together, that's always going to have the result that is going to be best. But we know that it's not always the way things happen. And so how do you navigate those waters and find common ground and find ways to create consensus to move things forward? Does anybody, I'm going to stop here. We have now completed the who section. Before we go into the what section, I want to see if anybody has any potential questions or clarifications, or wants to share anything in particular that they, a takeaway from these first set of slides. Go ahead, Lauren.
Hi, I just wanted to share one part of our ecology that I'm interested in hearing from other people as well about. We have a sunshine law, so that everything the board does must be done in public. That includes, we have just hired a new superintendent for the state of Hawaii, and we did the interviews for all the candidates and our deliberations in public. We are also about to start work on a new strategic plan. So that sunshine law really is a huge impact on how we do things. It also inhibits whether we can meet as board members before you come to the big meeting. I really liked the comment that Patty made about providing information in advance, data and information, especially on controversial issues. And I'm used to clearing away a lot of debris, not debris, but clearing away some of the issues where you can find common ground easily ahead of time, so that you use board meetings for the really difficult issues where there are more fundamental areas where that need to be worked out. And so a sunshine law that prohibits members from meeting ahead of time or in small groups to do that kind of thing, other than when convened specifically by the government, is a really important part. It's an advantage because we're in public and we're hearing the public's views, but it also makes for a very different working environment.
Great, thanks for sharing that. It's a really great observation. And we're actually going to touch on that a little bit further into this presentation. Anybody else have a question or a clarification, or want to share a takeaway from this section on the who? If not, let's just go ahead into the what. So this is really, the what is the work of state boards. And the way I think of this is really in two ways. One is sort of board activity. What does the board actually, the actions that the board takes? And then what are those system policies that boards influence, right? These are the two aspects of the what. And I also see the what. So starting with that activity part, there are really three areas that I consider to be the activity domains. One is this technical and procedural, right? What are those technical things, the protocols, the practices that you're required to effectively and legally operate as a board? Lauren raises a great one, which is the whole sunshine laws and all the regulations and the requirements that come with that. And the key features of understanding that is sort of learning them and honoring them. Right? The second one is this relational domain, that your activities are often done with relationships with others, whether that's governors or legislatures or members of the public or media. And the key there is really this idea of listening and communicating. How do you gather input? How do you gather perspectives and make sure those perspectives are represented, and so forth and so on? And then finally, programmatic. And I think this is the area that's in some ways the most satisfying and the most attentive to people's whys. These are the things that actually impact the effectiveness and excellence of the education system. So let's talk about each of these in turn. And you have places on your worksheet that we're going to go into. So the first one is really this technical and procedural domain. And I've selected, sort of 6 items. There are probably others. It starts with parliamentary procedure, which is one of those areas where we time and time again have members saying, hey, I'd love more training in parliamentary procedure because it can get very technical. Making motions and taking votes, that's the easy part. But when you want to make an amendment or a substitution, those things can be fairly challenging. We talked about sunshine laws. Again, what the laws of your state say has to, if it's public business, it has to take place in a public setting. The same is true sort of for open records. What do you have to maintain in terms of the records that you have, whether it's emails or things like that? And what does that actually look like? And what does that require? There are usually ethics laws in states that sort of stipulate when a conflict of interest might arise and what actions have to be taken in such cases. Things about gifts you can be that can be received. There might be nepotism aspects to your ethics laws and so forth and so on. There's protocol and decorum. What does the actual protocol for the board meeting look like? How do you, are you courteous to the people that have been recognized and so forth and so on? And then finally, in many cases, especially during the pandemic, there have been virtual meetings, and there are all sorts of requirements that have to do with virtual meeting processes. So that's the area of technical and procedural domain. And on your worksheet, you see these different areas. And I think the direction is to sort of think about these in your own understanding of them and your own mastery of them, and which are the ones that maybe you need to learn a little bit more about, or that you might need more training around, especially when you're new, because you may not always have a strong grasp. And there may be things that happen that kind of surprise you as the work of your board unfolds. The other domain is really this relational domain. And we spoke to that a little bit earlier, this notion, I think Patty did a really nice job, is that, first and foremost, there are other board members, getting to know who they are, why, what is their why? What are the priorities that they come to the table with? How are they going to influence the dynamic in your efforts to create collective leadership? And then you have a whole host of other players for which you may have or may not have relationships with the governor, with members of the legislature, with the state superintendent, with the department or key staff members of the department, with districts, private schools, public schools, all the school and delivery organizations, with associations, with other state agencies and other partner organizations, sometimes with parents and students, in some cases with the media, and there may be a whole host of others. And again, on your worksheet, there is this list, and it's really asking you to sort of reflect on the different kinds of players that have an impact in your state and the extent to which you may or may not have a relationship. And is there room for you to build a better relationship? And what might that look like? And how might you go about doing that? So that's kind of the relational domain. And again, this is all part of, the what, because the what is going to be influenced by these players. If you're appointed by a governor, the governor's office might call you and ask, for your perspective on a particular issue, or share the governor's perspective on a particular issue. The state superintendent may contact you if they need, help or support, or they want to understand where you're coming from on a particular issue, so that individual can incorporate it into what they're planning for the department's policy or what have you. So there's back and forth, and those kinds of backs and forths are facilitated by strong relationships. And how do you establish those? Now we're going to take a pause for a little game I called Never Did They Ever Tell Me. This is sort of like, I love when Steve Harvey does Family Feud. He says, we surveyed 100 people and they told us these answers. So we surveyed 100 board members about what they weren't told as, and the reason this is in this particular place, because most of these things that no one ever told them about had to do with either procedural or relational kinds of issues. And so here you see 10 icons, and the challenge is, and there may be prizes associated with this, depending on how much participation I have, is to pick an icon and say, what is it that icon represents that nobody ever told you was going to happen by virtue of you becoming a state board member? So who wants to take a crack and be the first one? Anybody?
Okay,
Now-
so maybe the
Go
one
ahead.
like with the phone or something is related to people not realizing that their like emails or text messages or something could be FOIA'd, maybe?
Sure. Or there might be a lot more things being said about you on social media. There might be a whole lot more text messages or people interacting with you electronically, and that has all kinds of implications for what records have to be maintained and how you may comport yourself differently than if you were just a private citizen. Great, I appreciate that. Woody, do you want to reflect? Go ahead.
The one with the guy or the person with all those frisbees or dishes in the air. Nobody told me how many balls I was going to have to keep in the air at the
That's
same
right.
time. So many different responsibilities and activities.
Yeah, you may not have known how long your agendas are or what the different things that your
Right.
board does. And, you have to be on a certain committee, or you have to help,
Right.
accomplish some other goal, right? You're juggling all those responsibilities. Nobody ever told you that.
Right.
Who else? Go ahead. I can't tell who's raised their hand. Usually it tells me here. Fern, go ahead.
First, I have to unmute myself. But I could look at the dollar bills and say, you don't make money. You are going to be of service. You are going to give by being on the board. You're not going to get any income, not in the state of Maine anyway.
Yeah.
And so, and even if you get your travel reimbursed at 45 cents a mile when it's costing $6 a gallon, it doesn't quite compute. So the idea of you're being of service, that's what it's all about in being on the state board.
It might actually cost you to be a member of the state board.
It
And
does.
I think the other part of this one was really that in some states, there are a pretty strict like financial disclosure information as part of being a public official. And they don't, people didn't know they were going to have to disclose, who they have debt with or what stocks they own, just so that the ethics commissioner, whomever, can gauge whether there are conflicts of interest. Steve Trimble, I see your hand up. Steve, do you want to take a crack at it?
Oh, I'm looking at the phone. Nobody told me that I was going to get so many emails and so many things from the commissioner and KDE that we have to read, not just almost daily. It's quite a bit of reading if you want to keep up with what's going on at the Kentucky Department of Education and what's going on across our state with education. There's a lot of reading that goes along with that.
Yeah, it's both this email icon, the envelope, and the vibrating phone. What about that angry face on the right? Are any of those people you're running into, Steve, not very happy?
Well, I've only been on the board about 6 months, so it's been pretty calm.
It's been okay.
So it's been okay up at this point. I'm sure that's a possibility down the road.
We had a lot of angry people from the public coming in and really abusing us, calling us names, and just casting aspersions on our good on ourselves.
Yes,
that was surprising to me that people
that
could
could be
be
hard.
so angry.
Now, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing your name right. Is it Nikki? Nikki, did you want to weigh in from Illinois?
Yes, sorry, I didn't unmute right away. Yes, I was just going to say the same thing about angry participants. Just that when they take a stand to tell you something, some of them are very angry, but we always have to be composed and be very polite and respectful. I think you get more done that way.
Absolutely.
And you are pronouncing my name correctly. It is
very
Nikki.
good. Thank you so much. Let's see. What about this one standing at the podium? Any clues about what that might be? Yeah.
This is Janet. It makes me think about learning as a board member that the most effective way for the board to speak is through at least our bylaws designate that our chair will speak as the voice of the board.
Right.
And the chair will be the voice of the board when the board has voted a position in support or whatever of something. And if you happen to not agree with that, you can either remain silent or make absolutely clear that you're speaking something different than what the voice of the board is.
Yeah,
And I think that's really essential for good communication with the public between the media outlets and the state board.
Right. Understanding your role vis-a-vis the role of the board and the board chair. I think the other thing that icon was meant to represent is sometimes people will call you and ask you to come and speak to a group, and not everybody is really comfortable doing that. And they're, a little bit surprised that their role has, gotten to the point where they are, being asked to come and present or make a speech at a particular group. What about that microphone? What do you think that might represent? Have any of you had to interact with the media?
Yeah.
That's what this one is about. When sometimes the media will come up to you and say, hey, what's your opinion on this action or what have you? And that also can throw people, especially if they haven't had to interact with the media before. That can be one of those things that no one ever told you about. And how do you manage those kind of requests for comment? Or again, to Janet's point, how do you make sure that what you say is in sync with what the board's position is? Or if you have a difference of opinion, you make it clear that that's your personal, that you're not speaking for the board when you speak to the media. All right. Very good.
Paolo?
Yes, go ahead.
It's Patty. I would add with the microphone that as a board member, you're always on stage, right? During
Yes,
board meetings.
Absolutely.
So it's really important to think about what you say and how you say it. Because your comments can end up on the front page of the newspaper, and maybe they're taken out of context, maybe they're not. But it's really important to remember that no matter where you are as long as people know you're a state board member, you are on stage. Yeah.
And in the case where now many board meetings are videotaped and recorded and archived on the web, that makes it all the more permanent that someone can go back and watch what was said, maybe use a clip out of context and so forth and so on. Thanks for raising that, Patty. All right, but you get the point that there are a lot of things that you have to learn about and navigate that people weren't always ready to tell you at the front end. And that's part of what this training is really all about. So let's move onward. Now, one of the things I wanted to feature at this point is each of you has a board executive. And the board executive is there to support you and to help keep the activities of the board moving along. And sometimes when you get those emails that you weren't expecting, or you get those phone calls that you weren't expecting, maybe they make an accusation like this teacher is doing something bad. And the point is, you are not an investigator. You should never, say, oh, well, I know the superintendent in that district, or I know the principal at that building. I'm going to call them and see what's going on. Please never do that, because it can compromise, whatever real investigation needs to take place. And this is how your board exec can often play a role as being a liaison to you. If you're not sure what to do or how to behave, or who to pass along an inquiry to so that a person can get an answer, or if there's some accusation of wrongdoing, that can then be, investigated correctly, that board executive can make that call. So McCall, I just want to have you introduce yourself and again, reflect a little bit on the role of the board executive.
Thanks, Paolo. My name is McCall Flynn. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Board of Public Education, and I am currently the National Council of State Boards of Education Executives, or as we call it, NASBE, representative on the NASBE board. I think Paolo did an excellent job highlighting some of the areas that really fall in that no one ever told me about or not on my radar category for board members. And I think it really emphasizes the importance of utilizing both the board executive, but also board staff as a key resource in your work on your boards. I know that not all states provide some kind of onboarding experience, but I would highly recommend and suggest that you spend some time getting to know your board executive director, the staff in the office, and really going over some of the information that Paolo mentioned earlier, like the board handbook, sample agendas and minutes, the bylaws, understanding what is going to be expected of you. And again, we heard about travel vouchers, other travel reimbursement information, board committees that you may be asked to sit on, and really any other information that you generally have, maybe some information that you heard about today. I just think that if possible, it's just really important to be able to have that initial conversation, not just to get to know each other, but to kind of from the beginning better understand what's being expected of you. I would also suggest having this discussion in person. I know that can be really difficult with everyone's busy schedules. Maybe you live in a big state, but coming from Montana, that is 147,000 square miles, we do this in person, and I find that to be very valuable. I think that one thing that we really try hard at the Board of Public Ed in Montana is to provide opportunities for our board members to also get to see each other in person outside of board meetings. I think that this just provides some more informal discussion for our board members. You get to know them on a different level. What are their families like? What are their day jobs? What are their interests? Not just learning about people sitting at a table together during board meetings. So those are maybe some of the things that I would highlight as an executive director. It's my hope that our board members always feel comfortable to reach out to us to, gauge feedback, really no matter the situation. We have many duties as board staff, but probably one of the most important is really to support our board members and their work, which, as we all know, is ultimately good for students. So thanks for letting me provide a little information today.
Thanks so much, McCall, for offering those remarks and for all the great work you do in Montana. The board execs are also a great resource for us at NASBE, because oftentimes if we're trying to understand what's happening in a state or what have you, we'll call them and they'll help us sort of sort through, oh, you've got this task force on this, how's that going? Or what progress are they making? Or we saw that your board took this action, what was that really all about? They can provide a richness of understanding for us as well. Woody, I see you have your hand raised. Do you want to reflect on this point as well?
Well, yes, in Connecticut, we don't have an executive director, and I was wondering if most states have executive directors, and I'd like to ask McCall how you relate to the Commissioner of Education. How do your responsibilities complement one another?
Yeah, so in Montana, I am the executive director. My position now is appointed by our board members. We have a 7-member board who are all appointed by the governor and confirmed by our Senate. Our superintendent of public instruction is actually elected. So we work very closely together. It's a lot of our agenda items and information that the board sees is really done at the commissioner's office or superintendent of public instruction's office. And those are the presentations that we receive. We work very closely, but we are not in their office. They are not in our office. We are separate.
And I imagine, McCall, when you get a question about like assessments or accountability, that you have contacts or either a point of contact at the department that helps you get a board member in touch with somebody who can provide answers and that sort of thing. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
So they serve
Paolo,
as
do most states have executive directors?
I think most states, in fact, do have, they may not always be called executive directors, but someone who stands and, or acts as the chief administrative staffer for the state board. Yes, I think that's true. There are some that don't. In most cases, they do.
Thank you.
All right, McCall, thank you for that. So now we come to that third aspect of the what, right? Which is what I call the programmatic domain, right? And I split it into two areas. One is sort of strategic, and the reason I use a birthday cake is because this is kind of the fun part, the really impactful, transformative aspect. There are also things that are routine and periodic. These are often sort of necessary things that I don't want to discount them because they do have an impact on program, but sometimes it's more they're routine approvals or renewals of certain things that are seen more as pro forma, all the while they have an impact or contribute to the underpinnings of the state's particular education system. And yet I think what I really want to talk about are more of those strategic areas, and that's what's going to be the focus of this programmatic domain. And so this is where the earlier parts of the what were really more on board activity, the protocols and procedures, the relational aspects, some of those technical aspects. Now we head into more of an understanding of systems policy. So again, here you have a part of your worksheet. I'm going to show you another video. And the challenge for you for this video is to look at, this is the video about a school that experienced a turnaround. It's only 5 minutes. I am not advocating any particular product or approach or anything that's particularly right or wrong. What I love about this video is in a fairly short time period, it highlights for you those areas of policy and practice that ultimately form sort of those systemic domains of the work of a Board of Education. So as you watch this video, take notes on the different things that you see, and then we will work together to kind of fit those into a framework that we use at NASBE to think about our work and the work of state boards. So here we go.
In the 2006-2007 school year, we were listed as one of the 30 worst performing schools in the state of North Carolina.
The things that I saw when I got here were children just running up and down the halls, hollering, screaming, just a level of almost mayhem.
A fair amount of them come without any resources at all. Some days our children go home and they may not have a home to go to. Some days our children go home and there may not be food.
There was a lot of teacher turnover back then, and I think we were in a mentality where it was just about teachers surviving.
There used to be bullies, like the bullies make you scared, like you didn't even want to look at them because they were like, you have a problem.
Back at that time, it kind of felt like the students were running the school in a sense. I quit my first year here because it was just so difficult for me. We had a principal that came in maybe in September, October of the school year. She spent the first couple of months just identifying everything that we needed to change about the school. Number one thing is we had to look at our staff. If you weren't here for the kids, this wasn't the place for you. The new principal who came in at the time, she called me and she said, Ms. Johnson, we really need you. We know that you're a phenomenal teacher. Could you please just come back? And my only request was from her was that if I come back, something has to be different. Then once we got all of the right people, that's when we began to look at what we were doing in the classroom and why our kids weren't getting it. And we found the root of that to be the way that we were teaching our students. Once we go over each of these big pieces of the lesson planning process, you need to go back to your plans and adjust. Implement whatever we've learned in the session, correct it, revise it, do whatever that may be. 4 teachers from our school went to a training in Atlanta to look at this new instructional model, and that's when we brought in the non-negotiables. Essential question, and then we have our key vocabulary. Then we went to essential and high order thinking questions, which we spent time on.
I think the biggest thing that we've had to focus on here is creating a professional development plan that's consistent. What does research show that really works? And then being consistent in that implementation across multiple years.
How do you craft questions would be one question, and then what?
How do we challenge our students?
How do we challenge our students? Now we have collaborative learning where students are on board and they are participating and they know what to expect. So there's a huge difference between what it was like 4 years ago and now.
And how they dress or do something in public. Let's say they're sagging or something like that. And the stereotypical ways, they come from a bad home or they around bad people or something like that.
Okay, so you answered 2 questions in one. You talked about the character motivations, and then you went into one of the hot cues, which was generalizations and stereotypes. If I were to give some advice to any teachers, staff, schools that are in our situation or similar, the one thing that I would tell them is you have to be intentional about building relationships with your students so that they will want to work and want to be successful. It feels good when you can walk around to every classroom and kids are engaged. It's a great thing when students talk about teachers that they have good relationships with.
I think the teachers here, they are so hands-on and they'll come to you, and I think Ms. Johnson cares a lot.
What is that?
Can you
That
do
looks
the
like a
little-
cloud.
Yeah, do the little ruffle thingies, you know.
Maybe you could put layers of those.
Okay, good.
It's all about relationships for us. Having those relationships with our staff, with each other, and with our students, that's what works. That's what makes a difference here at Cochran.
The reason why I do what I do is for my students. If I didn't get the results that I got, if I didn't see their faces every day, there would be no point in me being here. The gift that I receive more so than monetary gifts is knowing that my students are empowered.
Great. So hopefully you have taken some notes in terms of what you saw, the different aspects of that. And now we're going to sort of reflect on that in the context of this framework. This is a framework that helps support and help us think about at NASBE the different aspects of our work and the different, frankly, aspects of what state boards do. And I think I was lucky enough to find this video that encompasses almost every one of these different aspects. So we're going to go through them one at a time. And again, I would ask you all to chime in as you think about what you saw and how it interfaces with the kinds of things that state boards are about and that they engage in. Some of you will know more about what those things are based on your experience. And if you've only been on the board for a little while, maybe you don't have a complete understanding. And part of this process is to help design for you understanding what it is you do know about your board's work and what you don't. So I want to start with this, we're going to do each of these rings in turn, and we're going to start with the outer ring, which is really systems. And one of the things we do here at NASBE, and this will come out in one of the slides that my staff will talk you through during our breakout sessions, is that we really hold as very high excellence and equity. Ultimately, those are two main goals that we want for the education system. We want it to be excellent, and we want it to project equity. And those fall into this systemic category. Now, so talk to me a little bit about and reflect on what did you see in that video clip that amplified and that reflected some of the systemic areas that are part of the education policy and practice universe. And of course, my bullet points should be a good set of prompts for you.
Paolo, would you repeat that question?
Sure. Talk about the things that you saw or the words that you heard being said that really sit at the systemic place. So I'll give you a for instance, right? Obviously, the state, in that case of North Carolina, must have had some accountability system that was used to rate that school as poor performing. It was one of the first things that principal said is that, our school was rated as one of the worst. And to me, that implies an accountability system that likely was part legislative, part state board, initiative at a systemic level. It impacted every school, every district, and was something that enveloped the entire system, right? What are the other kinds of things that came out in that video that sort of speak to that systemic aspect of the policy and practice universe?
Yeah. One of the things I noticed right off was the one teacher said that she had been there and she left. And one of their symptoms was lots of teacher turnover. And then
Yes.
when they started to address their issues, one of the first things they said was that we've got to get the right people in place. And they went to her and asked her to come back and worked on putting together a team of people who cared about these kids and who would make a difference in the lives of these kids.
And Janet, you make a great point. And in fact, what I'm going to suggest to you is that will actually come into this schools category, because there's a lot of things that state boards can't do. And we have to acknowledge that too. You can't dictate what a good school culture looks like, right? You can't dictate that everybody's going to get along, they're going to be on the same page, they're collaborating. And in fact, but you can create the conditions that help schools understand what a good culture looks like and how they can accomplish that.
I just know in Utah, we hear these reports on our turnaround schools.
Yeah.
And one of the things that is usually a red flag is when there's a lot of teacher turnover.
Right, right.
And we typically will give our turnaround schools a professional expertise of people who will come in and help them change that.
Right, right. We also heard data. Obviously, there's a data collection system that must be being managed at the state level. There's got to be an assessment system, because they made reference to some of the words that appeared on the screen and the graphs were driven by what appeared to be state assessment systems, data collected by the state. You also obviously saw that there were a number of things that reflected state regulations and other things that create the conditions for what necessarily has to be in place to operate at the systemic level. There was also implied that there were learning standards that ultimately anchored the assessments in the accountability system. Tom, did you want to weigh in?
I did. That there was also mentioned, and I thought it was a very powerful piece about their professional development plan was consistent and research-based. And that goes back to your whole point about the ecology, because all too often professional development is kind of professional development du jour. What do we have today? But to make that plan based upon what do the data say, what do we need to do, how do we go about doing that, melds those two pieces of data collection and accurate utilization for that data.
Great, very observant. Thank you, Tom. I also see, let's see, Jackie, you have your hand up. Do you want to reflect?
Yes. Can you, okay, yes. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
What resonated with me, especially being a principal and teacher,
right.
was that the learning standards were a big, they analyzed the assessments and they reacted based on the learning standards. They were accountable. Okay, and that's what you want to see, that are these schools reacting to the standards, and is that is it working?
Right.
So my thing was it working? There was a reaction, there are learning standards, and there is accountability. So those things resonated with me.
Yeah, which actually speaks to this notion of how does school improvement actually take place in a state based on an accountability system? What kind of supports are there? How do you help a district? They said the principal came in and the first thing they did was see all the things that had to be corrected. And sometimes that's done, with the assistance of a consultant or with some sort of, guide that says, here are all the things that represent what a high performing school looks like. Nikki, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, I think there's also a funding element there too. A lot of times when they see that change and they have an improvement plan, you might get extra support with extra funding to support them through that process. And a lot of times the boards will allocate a certain amount of money to help them through that improvement process.
Yeah. Woody?
This is Woody. Something that was brought out in the video but wasn't really addressed was the lack of order in the school. They said how the kids were running wild in the hallways, and it showed that one student who said he was bullied. And I didn't see anything that really addressed how they dealt with that.
And in some ways, Woody, that's a nice transition to my second circle, which is school, right? And the school, the issue you raise is really one of school culture, right? School culture and climate. And what are the things that school has in place? And what are the policies that may impact what that school culture and climate looks like? Again, sometimes state legislatures or state boards get into issues of student discipline, understanding, inequities in school discipline practices and procedures. They may also get into issues of school climate and either promote climate surveys or ways to better gauge the kinds of activities that are happening in schools, maybe creating the conditions that districts can effectively address things like bullying and other things. And it wasn't really pronounced in the video itself, but I think sometimes in the school's space is also this notion of health and wellness. When a student comes to the schoolhouse door and either can't see the whiteboard at the front of the room and needs glasses, or has some sort of health affliction that takes away from their ability to participate in the learning experience, what kind of supports can we put into place to create those conditions for that school as a community of practice, as a culture, to be able to operate at its most effective. Nikki, did you want to reflect? Do you have your hand up? Or did you just want to take your hand down? What other aspects of, go ahead.
There we go.
There you go. Steve, did you want to weigh in?
Well, I think about school culture. It's important that kids can feel safe at school. And it sounded like it was just chaotic before the new principal came in. And so that affects everything dealing with the school. If the kids don't feel comfortable, they don't feel safe, they're not going to respond very well with any kind of education. So I think that was a very, very important school culture to help get that straightened out.
Can I ask something?
Yeah, please go ahead.
I was going to say, not only do the kids need to feel safe, so do the teachers, and that whole leadership process is going to be part of that. Because the first person who was speaking, who said they left the school, it could have been a discipline issue as well. And once all that got supported and you had different leadership and they took on different roles, it's making it safe for everyone so that they can all work together.
And what's important to recognize is these aren't just random. There aren't, and sometimes people approach it as random acts of improving culture, but there are systems that you can put into place around how you enforce, a strong school culture, how you set clear expectations for students, how you set clear expectations for faculty and staff in terms of how they interact with students, and so forth and so on. And while a board may not prescribe certain things as a matter of policy, they certainly can create the conditions either through professional development initiatives or simply helping to share what best practice looks like for schools and districts to embrace as they try to tackle some of the things that video presented in terms of the chaos that might exist in a particular school.
Well, I'd like to interject also.
Please, Jackie.
I would say the foundation of learning, period, is all about relationships that a student will have with a teacher. Students mainly learn because of what's in their heart, not what's in their head. If that student can say that that's my teacher and my teacher cares, and vice versa, you're going to get a different climate, you're going to get a different culture. And I know that at our level, just providing those opportunities where the principals and the superintendents can get the training that has to do with relations and relationships, et cetera,
yeah,
is a really big thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that came out in the video. There were a couple of points where either the student observed that this teacher really cared about me, or the teacher observed that I really care about my kids. That notion of having caring adults so that each student can point to a caring adult in the building that they know they can go to, that can help them sort through challenges or what have you. That's all part of that school culture category. And there are also ways that you can systematize that. You don't have to leave it up to chance. You can just make deliberate decisions and implement deliberate practices that'll ensure that happens. And oftentimes it involves everyone. It can involve bus drivers and cafeteria workers and, maintenance staff and so forth and so on, as part of creating that culture of care, of belongingness, of family and so forth. All right, let's go to the next one, which is really the teachers and leaders, right? This also came out very loudly in the video, because ultimately these are the people to whom we charge with the challenge of providing that educational experience, right? And so the principal was featured throughout as being that force of not only helping that school sort through its challenges, but then also putting into place, and not necessarily, from the sense I got, although it's not really clear in the video, that it wasn't like a top-down thing. It was a very inclusive process where leaders work with teachers on, understanding the data, identifying the possible strategies that will make a difference, and then put those things into place. And in particular, in this segment, this notion of having a really robust professional development, professional learning approach that drives, that continual improvement of the teaching staff and the administrative staff around what great education practice looks like. Steve, did you want to reflect?
Yes, I would. I'd just like to say that the higher expectation of teachers by the principal, I think, was important. And basically, I think they said if you wasn't going to be there and do a good job, you didn't need to be there. And so he created and helped create high expectations from the teachers, and that carried over into their classrooms. And maybe with the plan that they had, they felt more like they could be more successful in the classroom, and with all the professional development things that they had. And again, if you can keep the kids busy and fill up the kit, teachers care and are trying and working hard, that goes a long way with the culture too.
Yeah. And I think a big issue right now, it wasn't part of the video, but the whole notion of preparing teachers, the licensure process, ensuring that we have sufficient numbers of teachers right now, again, sort of in this post-COVID period, whether they're, making sure we can find the right number of substitutes, as well as just the regular develop the teacher pipeline, as well as ensuring diversity within that teacher pipeline. Those are all areas that, when we sit down as a staff and think of, and ask ourselves, what are boards wrestling with right now? A lot of those issues in terms of the teacher workforce come out. And in particular, it's also true in the early childhood education arena. These are staff that have historically been paid very little. And yet, as we try to improve the access and the quality of those experiences, we have to wrestle with how do we find the workforce and ensure that it's a quality workforce to create that educational experience for our youngest learners. All right, the next one is really, and you got a healthy dose of this in the video, is exactly what those learning experiences look like, right? This is the curriculum. This is the instructional materials, the instructional frameworks that are used. What does that practice actually look like? And you got that sense that the key aspect of the professional development was they had gone to this training in Atlanta. It seemed to be something that resonated and made sense, and I'm sure it was evidence-based for that particular community and the context. And then they went about the work of implementation and actually using high quality, curricular materials, high quality and proven instructional practices and instructional frameworks. And we're able to, and again, the video tended to make that connection that by doing that, that's what had an impact on the academic improvement that they were seeing. And I think it's fundamental, because sometimes it's funny, as you can imagine, I look at reports that come out from think tanks, and periodically RAND will do reports to say, okay, well, what percentage of what's taught in the classroom actually aligns to the standards that the state has set forth? And sometimes it's like, 50%. And you think to yourself, something as what would seem to be as simple as curriculum alignment, aligning what is being taught in the classroom to the actual standards themselves, you would think that would be more generally practiced, and yet we still find places where more attention needs to be paid to exactly that kind of phenomenon. That learning, how you structure the learning experience, what it looks like, and I think the other aspect of it is the consistency within the organization around that learning approach. So teachers are reinforcing those approaches and those behaviors among and between themselves, rather than just working in isolation and everybody sort of doing their own thing. And again, this is another place where the work of a board, some of the things it can't really influence directly, but there are times when you want to promote the use of high quality instructional materials, or you might create the conditions that allow for more personalized learning experiences or even career focused educational experiences. Those would be within the, might be in the purview of the kind of policy and prioritization that boards can impact. Any other reflections on the learning experiences part of this of the video? The thing about this video, and I tried to find something that was really small and got to most of these things. It really didn't talk too much about parents and families. And yet this, is also a really, really key area of the educational experience, because parents and families are the child's first teachers, and ensuring that there's that strong connection, strong alignment, strong sense of support between the school and the home is really essential. And and in this category, I also count things like community partnerships and other kinds of things of that nature, where the school looks, beyond the classroom walls to really engage those external stakeholders and interests in supporting the education experience of students. And then our graphic always ends with our student at the center. And, and so as you can see, and again, now that we've sort of walked through it, if we were to watch the video again, we're not going to do that, but you would then again see all the different areas. And in some ways, this is what it's all about, because I think going back to that idea that binds us, right? If we want every student to have a great education in our state, then part of that means that school experience has to be a great experience for every student. And that school experience is this combination of that school culture and climate, the personnel, the teachers and leaders in the school, the learning experiences, the interface with families and parents in the context of systemic pieces and parts that support a great education. And that's what gives you this framework that we use to think about the work that we do and the work that state boards do. So any questions or additional reflections that you have? Part of what you have in your worksheet looks at each of these different categories. And again, you might be sitting there thinking, gee, I understand some things, but on some areas, it's not totally clear to me, what role our board plays, or what are the kinds of things that we can influence. Make some notes to yourself about areas that you might want to either pursue more specifically in terms of your own personal development, or that you would have an interest in, and you might reach out for gaining a better understanding. Because one of the things we also like to do is, we will share reports from think tanks. We will share books that are being written about certain aspects of the educational experience that we think school board members will benefit from by virtue of helping them increase their own awareness and understanding of the various things that they can make a contribution towards. Questions or clarifications or reflections that you might have? All right, so let's go to the last part of my presentation, and this is the how. And the how I divide into three areas. One is first the authorities, right? Boards have specific authorities, specific things they're charged with doing. That's one aspect of the how. The second one is really the tools at their disposal that also allows them to do their work and make a difference and make an impact. And then, and in some ways, this is always a little bit fuzzy, but I think it's hugely important, is the dispositions that boards have and board members have in terms of how they approach the work. So let's start with each of these. And in some ways, we're going to, to me, there's this always a little bit of a fuzzy line between the formal and the informal. Boards always have certain formal authorities, and you can usually tell what they are by reading the statutes or looking at board agendas. But sometimes boards can also influence things informally. They can decide to prioritize something. They can put a task force together. They can say, look, we have a real problem in this area. We're going to bring some people together to study it and do some things. That may not always be part of their formal authority, but in recognizing that there's room for improvement somewhere, they can exert, that informal authority that comes from prioritizing, from elevating. And so, the first half of that is that formal authority. Most boards either have some mention in their state constitutions or sections in their constitution that ultimately form the foundation for the laws that the legislature has passed that sanction the existence of the board. And then those laws that usually amplify or assign to the board certain specific duties and responsibilities are then amplified in rules, and whatever they call them in your particular state, the administrative code or, what have you, that really speaks to the more detailed aspects of what a state board does in terms of its formal authority. Then sometimes boards themselves can promulgate rules about what they're able to do. And they also have a role in promulgating policies or working with the State Department of Education in terms of designing and embracing certain policies that ultimately then become programs and practices that manifest themselves in terms of what's happening in the schools of your particular state. So you have this kind of chain of authority. The Constitution of your state isn't going to talk about teacher licensure. That's likely to be something that is mentioned in the law and then amplified by rule, and then also impacted by the policies that a board may adopt working in tandem with their state department or with the state superintendent. And then ultimately how that actually takes place as part of the programs and practices. The other thing we'd like to talk about in terms of state board authority is, again, and this really presents that blend of the formal and informal, because clearly boards have certain explicit powers that we call the power of policy. But they also have these authorities that allow them to ask questions and to bring people together. We call the middle one power of the question, right? Why is this a certain way? And again, you have to imagine going back to the video, and this happened at the school level, but people saw these numbers. Why aren't our students, performing better? Why aren't they more proficient? A board can also look at data and ask those kind of questions, or ask questions about the things that they see, the things that they note, the things that the data tells us, the things that they're hearing from their constituents. And that then can generate, conversations about, okay, can we envision something better and what might better look like? The other power that they have that again helps amplify both in times the formal part of a board's work as well as the informal is that power to bring people together. We always know, and this is again another takeaway from the ecosystem slide, that boards are going to be stronger if they're working in collaboration with other education interests and with others who are playing in the education ecosystem. And so how do you bring people together so that different perspectives are represented and you can engage around a particular issue that you've identified in order to shape an approach, to identify a direction to go in that then may require either formal action by the board, or it may require like a recommendation to the legislature or certain training for schools and districts that doesn't necessarily come out of a policy, but more as a practice perspective, or sharing or building the understanding of people around certain aspects of research and evidence. And so all those things kind of fall into these three categories of board authority: the power of policy, the power of the question, and the power to convene. Now, one of those areas where some of these things come together and ultimately drive, I would argue, a strong direction of improvement and excellence for a state is this idea of a strategic plan. Many states have, as part of their statutes for their state boards, this mandate, or even for their departments, to develop a strategic plan. Some states don't have it, but their boards kind of do it anyway because they see the value of sort of taking stock of where they are and charting a course for what better might look like and how to get there. And so I've kind of framed this as a set of tools, like what are the tools that form the different aspects of a strategic plan. Part of it is vision. You saw that earlier slide where I talked to you about Mississippi's vision statement, right? That's a single statement that helps galvanize people together to say, yes, we are about helping Mississippi to have an excellent education system. But then it's also going to speak to things like a theory of action. Well, what are those drivers? What are those levers that are going to generate improvement? What data and evidence do we have that help us understand where we are, where we want to go, and how we might get there? How do we go ahead and talk about the goals that we want to set, and maybe even set targets and use measures to gauge the level of improvement that we're experiencing and how much better we're getting? And then, sort of key to the strategic plan is what are those strategies we're going to use. And anytime you look at a strategic plan, you'll see, maybe they have 4 pillars, maybe they have 7, domains. States will use different terms about what their focus areas are going to be that they have seen and determined to be the key contributors. You might also have within those strategies certain focus areas, certain action steps. Part of this all is also about resources and how do you allocate resources, and then also how do you build partnerships with other interested parties so that the power of the collective extends beyond the board and the department and the chief, but embraces the associations and practitioners and even the broader community of the state. Then a big thing that I'm increasingly interested in is the idea of improvement systems. What does a systematic approach to improvement, both at the state level and at a district level and at a school level, really look like? And how do we create the conditions for that improvement process to be better understood and actually better practice? So I'm going to use this opportunity. I want to turn it over. I actually have this extract from the Mississippi Strategic Plan. You see their vision, their mission, and here were their, sort of 6 strategic plan goals that their board had coalesced around. This was back in 2021. And this has formed the foundation for the work that they do. I've also asked Fern, who is a member of the Maine State Board of Education and also is the current Secretary Treasurer to the NASBE Board of Directors, to reflect a little bit on Maine's experience with strategic planning. And Fern, I'm going to go to the next slide, which is page 1 of the document you sent me, and then I have another slide that's page 2. So take it away, Fern.
Thank you very much, President Paolo. So I took over the role of chair of the Maine State Board of Education on July 1st, 2021, which is last July. And the 5-year strategic plan of the board was ending December 31st. So it was my responsibility to work with the board in developing the 2022 to 2026 strategic plan. And as much as that seemed like quite a challenge to start off with, it ended up being a very good experience for me in working with the board. We worked for a 4-month period in committees and in board workshops from our annual retreat, which was held in August, all the way to December, when the plan was accepted by a unanimous vote of the state board. From there, we started discovering how valuable this tool would be in our working together. There were new board members on, and it was an overall very good experience for everyone. So it forced the board to set its priorities, to identify their goals within those priority areas, the rationale for the goals that were chosen, the actions that were going to be taken to reach our goals, the expected outcomes, the metrics by which we would measure success of our reaching our goals, and the milestones for each of the 5 years of the plan. Our strategic plan provides our roadmap. Very simply, it's our roadmap for getting to our destination. It really keeps us on track. And let me elaborate on that, on why it's so important. I'll quickly provide just 3 examples of how our plan proved to be of great service to me as chair of the board and to the overall work of our board. These are true experiences that I had in just the last 10 days. And so just last Friday, I got a call from an attorney with a law firm that provides legal assistance to many school administrative units in Maine. He was trying to decide on a topic that would be of great interest to superintendents and local school boards at their annual fall conference, which is held every October in Augusta, the MSMA conference, Maine School Management Association conference. So I asked if he was sitting at his computer, and he said that he was. So I had him go to the State Board of Education website and to our strategic plan. I told him to go to goal 4 of priority number 4. And priority 4 is school construction and renovations. And so if you scroll down all the way to page 20, it took him to our milestones. And when you look at year 3, our milestone for 2024, there was the answer to his question on school construction. When would we open up the application period for school systems to apply, to be approved, or to be put on a priority list for school construction? And so he could refer to my strategic plan or to the state board's strategic plan and see where we were at with looking at future construction for our schools in Maine, because the State Board of Education in Maine has the last say on projects, the priorities that, like right now we have our priority list of 2017, 2018. That is the current rating cycle. We have 74 schools that are listed, and the state board has the last say on the site selection, the concept approval, the financial approval of the plan, and the overall moving forward with the construction of a new school. So taking him to goal 4, where it states the Maine State Board of Education will establish a new rating cycle for the major capital school construction program by the spring of 2026. He's able then to gauge what he wants to deliver to superintendents and board members in Maine. So, it's all in writing, it's right there. Second example, last Tuesday, I had a meeting with the Director of Higher Education and Educator Support Services at the Department of Education. And he wanted to discuss with me a glitch that exists between, we just put in place new certification rules for our educators in Maine, and this became effective June 10th. And he found a glitch in what we've put and with the main rule for our educator preparation programs. Now that rule is the state board's rule, chapter 114. A while ago when President Paolo talked about rules and chapters, we have different ways of referring to these. But I was able to have a conversation with him that our priority 3, which Paolo showed you on the first page, where we identified priorities 1, 2, 3, 4, priority 3 is on certification and higher education. And so we then could talk about how we knew that by updating chapter 115 meant that down the road we had to update chapter 114 educator program approval rules. And so we conversed about that and the process that's in place. And you can see how it's all outlined in our milestones, 2022, 2023, 2024, where we're going to go with chapter 114. So again, this person can go back and look at our strategic plan and say, it is going to be addressed. They have it in their plan. My third example, as board members, it's easy to add a number of goals to what the board will undertake. And board members always come up with new ideas, and they are great ideas many, many times. However, our strategic plan helps keep you with a focus on what is most important to accomplish. The priorities that you have carefully considered as a board and established that this is what you want to move forward with. And so again, as much as you may be tempted to take on these new ideas, new goals at times, you need to really look at the overall realistic capacity of your board. What is it that we can accomplish within a certain amount of time, and try to look at staying on track. So priorities, and again, going to our very first page of our strategic plan, our priorities are right there. We have 4 priorities, and they keep you on track so that you can be where you want to be in a specific time period. And I hesitate to have a little commercial to the side here, and I haven't been asked to say anything about where NASBE can be of help in developing a strategic plan, but I do want to say that just taking on as chair and developing a strategic plan for the state board, initially, that was like, why does it happen to me? Why couldn't it happen in my second year as being chair or third year, whatever? But NASBE was of great help to me and to the board in that in reaching out to NASBE, they provided a facilitator for our August retreat last fall to just get us going on what we needed to be looking at, how to go about doing it, giving us ideas. And that retreat with the facilitator from NASBE made a huge difference in making us be at a good place in accomplishing the task that we wanted to accomplish. And I'd have to say, as a side note also, we don't have an executive director in the state of Maine. So we're a working board, and it's very important to be able to have resources out there, and NASBE was that to us in developing our strategic plan. So I want to give credit to NASBE, and one of the benefits of being a member of NASBE, which is very important
Absolutely.
and to the state of Maine. So thank you very much, President Paolo.
Great, Fern. Thank you so much for that reflection and for that little bit of plug, because you're absolutely right. Part of our regular, and you'll get a better, deeper discussion of the different services that NASBE provides as part of the breakout room by area. We'll talk about what those different services look like. And so one of the things on your worksheet is really going back to this graphic is think about in your state, do you have a strategic plan, and does it have some of these different elements? And part of that is also, sort of, do you have a sense as a board member that there's a clear set of priorities, set of directions, set of measures and goals that have been established for the work that your board does? And oftentimes it's really not limited to the board's work as much as it's also part of the broader education, excellence strategy. And how does that all fit? So take an opportunity to think through, and this is another one if you're really pretty new to your board, where working with your board executive to sort of say, okay, how do we measure what success we're achieving, or how, what are the different points of focus that we are using in our work, or where are those key partnerships that allow us to be very integrated and aligned in terms of supporting our students and so forth and so on. Okay, so that brings us to the last segment of the how. And that's really talking about dispositions, right? And I think this is one of those where, people sometimes will scratch their head and say, what does this really have to do with how boards work? But I would suggest to you, and again, there's no particular magic to the words that you see here on the screen, but I think what has happened is over the course of our experience at NASBE, working with so very, very many boards, with so very, very many board members, we have pieced together, these, and in most cases, they're pairs of words that really speak to what highly effective boards embrace in terms of disposition, right? So I'm just going to do a quick once around the horn. Learning and understanding. Be open to learning new information and gaining a deeper understanding of the challenges and the circumstances and the research and the evidence that is available based on the work you do. Commit to communicating and listening, sharing what you're doing, but also opening yourself up to wide perspectives in terms of the input you might receive and the points of view that have value in your policy making and deliberative roles. Treat each other and others with courtesy and respect. Everybody that comes to the table largely has the interest of students in mind, has the interest of the education system in mind. There's no reason why we shouldn't be anything other than courteous and respectful. Focus and prioritize, on the other hand. We can try to address everything, but there's value in identifying those places where we think can have the greatest impact or make the greatest difference. Talk about what that is. A lot of strategic plans have a key element of focus and prioritization because people are able to identify or coalesce around those areas that really can make the biggest difference. Be patient and be persistent. We know that you don't just snap your fingers or pass some policy or adopt a rule and all of a sudden things are going to change. It's going to take time. The best practitioners put things in place that allow there to be regular reports on the implementation, regular reports on what impact is being had. A lot of strategic planning processes and monitoring processes involve looking at data over time that will hint at whether a particular strategy or approach is making a difference. And then also sticking to something, even though you might see it's not working, but if you see indicators that, yeah, but it's making a difference and you're seeing changes in adult behavior, it may make sense to continue to stick with things. Sometimes we abandon things too quickly, just as they're beginning to take root. And oftentimes what I've seen is things maybe start looking a little bit worse as people are getting, used to doing something differently before they start showing the impact that they can have in terms of improvement. Take time to celebrate. I know I've interacted with so many board members, and this is a really wonderful and very satisfying and often a fun part of the job. Maybe you celebrate your state teacher of the year. Maybe you celebrate, you have a state principal of the year or a superintendent of the year. Maybe you're recognizing students for outstanding accomplishment. Maybe you're celebrating when you see data that represents the positive impact of board action that's being taken. Find those ways to elevate, because too much of what happens in the education universe is, negative and constantly, criticizing or looking at negatively some of the things that are happening. And yet I'm a believer that there's so many, many, many positive and good things happening, and we should identify them, elevate them, and celebrate them. I'm also a huge believer in partnerships. We do not have to do this work alone. There's so many interests that want to be part of helping to improve our education systems. When I was working in Ohio, I was proud to build stronger relationships with the business community, stronger relationships with the healthcare community, stronger relationships with the mental health infrastructure of the state. And even within the education system, making sure that you have strong relationships with those who work in career technical education or some of the career technical student organizations, and celebrating the great work that they all do. Because at the end of the day, people will value the fact that they have input, that they have perspective, that they've been asked to be partners, and they will give you great feedback and perspective. And then they will be some of your strongest champions because they had a voice, because they were involved, because you did them the grace of asking them to be partners with you as you thought about policies and practices. At the center of this graphic is this notion of student-centric, always asking yourself, what impact will this have on the students of our state? And using that as kind of the primary lens through which you look at the work that you do. And of equal importance is embracing an equity lens, and not only thinking about students in general, but thinking about students from all different backgrounds and experiences, racial and ethnic minority groups that have been, historically marginalized. How do the policies that we put forth, how do the practices and programs that we initiate play out in those communities and for those individuals, whether they be teachers, whether they be students, whether they be communities, and how do we ensure that we create the conditions for each and every student to have a great educational opportunity and to be successful. And then finally, and I think Jackie brought this out very nicely in one of her original reflections, this notion of compromise and consensus. So many times we might come to the table and say, look, here's something that I'm not really going to give on. I'm really going to, hold my ground. And there's a mental calculus that every one of us goes through about, would I rather make a little bit of progress on something I care about, or hold back and not make any progress because I need to, have all or nothing. And I get that calculus is going to be different for each and every individual. But I think it's worth at least understanding what the options are and the extent to which you might be able to find common ground, especially if people are asking and signaling to you that they're willing to acknowledge and respect your particular point of view. So that idea of, how do you identify those opportunities for compromise and consensus, and what might that look like, and what role do you play? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a little video clip on that last aspect. You will, and again, pay attention to who is trying to engineer compromise and consensus, who's coming up with new and different approaches, who's signaling what to whom, and what does the outcome look like?
The problem appears to be unsolvable. Maybe we could run some computer simulations.
There are too many variables. It would take forever.
We've got to be missing something. Let's start again. The movie is playing here at 7:20, here at 7:40, here at 8:10, and here at 8:45.
All right, these theaters have to be eliminated.
Why? They're state-of-the-art digital projection, 20-channel surround sound.
Yes, but they have no icy machines. Despite my aggressive letter writing campaign, I might add.
What about the multiplex here? The seats are terrific.
They have Twizzlers instead of red vines. No amount of lumbar support can compensate for that.
Well, it's going to take at least an hour to eat, and I don't see a Sheldon-approved restaurant proximate to a Sheldon-approved theater.
We could eat after the movie.
Unacceptable. The delay would result in tomorrow morning's bowel movement occurring at work.
Hang on. There's a 7-Eleven here. We smuggle Slurpees, which are essentially ices, in under our coats after having a pleasant meal either here, or here.
Wow. I don't see how we missed that. Excuse me, in what universe are Slurpees ices?
That's how we missed it.
Sheldon, would you be prepared on a non-presidential basis to create an emergency ad hoc Slurpee icy equivalency?
Oh, Leonard, you know I can't do that.
Okay, I guess we only have one option.
Yep, I don't see any way around it.
Bye, Sheldon.
See ya.
Later, dude.
They're right, it was the only option.
So hopefully that gives you a sense about, maybe your next board meeting looks a little something like that. And again, I think it's an interesting vignette at the effort that people make to find, middle ground, and knowing sometimes that, hey, it's not going to have the impact that you had all hoped for. Any other reflections on that little video snippet that anybody wants to make?
I would like to say something.
Please.
I think what you said was resonating so much. One of the biggest challenges with boards or people collectively coming together to move westward is that there's going to be people who will say, this is my agenda and I don't want to hear anything else you have to say, or changing, or, and it causes our boards with an S, not to appear working together to the public. And when we, just like you said before, when we don't appear to collaborate, then we lose maybe one or two people on the board. They may have, become popular, but overall that body will not have popularity, or people will not believe in that body. Believing in one or two people is not enough. It has to be that whole body as a team working together. And sometimes, looking at other boards, I'm talking about the smaller district boards, that happens a lot. You have one or two people everybody's yaying for, and then everybody else, they're the villains. So just I know at this level right here, we really have to watch, be cognizant of that, that we want us to be one. But that's what that makes me think of.
Yeah. No, those are great observations, Jackie. And what's unfortunate is when boards get along, the media doesn't really cover that. They don't celebrate the good work you but they
Absolutely.
will latch on when they see disagreement and disheartenment.
Yes.
They love to play that out. And again, I love the media. I've worked with plenty of great journalists and so forth. But there is this tendency to want to talk about those times when there's lack of harmony rather than when there is harmony. And so how do you, now, and some people thrive on that, right? But by and large, it actually tends to be counterproductive in terms of what you're trying to do for the education system. So how do you strike that balance? And again, I think the video tried to show that, if you listen and are at least trying to help solve what you think the problem is and be respectful of each of the voices around the table, then maybe you could come to a solution that actually has a really high element of respect for a particular individual's or a particular point of view that's at the table. Always recognizing that point of view may decide, hey, they still aren't happy. Other reflections on compromise and consensus, or frankly any of the other dispositions that we talked about, or any other dispositions that you feel weren't on our little graphic that you would suggest as really being very important to how boards can function effectively. If not, I'm going to end my, before we go into breakouts, I have this last slide, which is really, again, based on our experience working with lots of boards, with lots of board members, we have this little list of, commitments. If you embrace these commitments, it will increase the likelihood that, you will be part of the collective voice and collective leadership of your board. You'll be able to do impactful things. You'll be able to have a successful experience as a board member. Represent all students and families, focus on student success, be prepared, do the work that you need to in order to be effective. And sometimes that means, and that's the next one, ask questions. This is where your board exec comes into play, or maybe even your department or your state superintendent. If you're confused about something you see on the agenda, don't wait till you're sitting in the meeting getting ready to vote. Ask the questions, seek out the information to the extent that the laws of your state allow you to do that, so that you are more understanding and well-versed in that particular issue before, you're called upon to vote. Be respectful of the different voices that come to the table to share their particular point of view. Leave your turfiness at the door, because ultimately it's through that ability to kind of be present and engage in the back and forth of the deliberations and finding that consensus that can have tremendous payback and tremendous tremendous results. And then view the decisions through an equity lens so that every student is given the opportunity to be successful. And the point that was made earlier about understanding your role, that you don't speak for the board, you still preserve your own individual perspectives. But at a point, the collective of the board is often the purview of the board chair. That doesn't mean you can't have your own opinions, but make sure you reflect those as, not being the perspectives of the board. So with that, I'm going to pause just for a minute or two for any final questions or clarifications that you all might have before we go into our breakout sessions. Hopefully, one of the things that I'll ask, if you have time in the breakouts, is to go back over your worksheet and reflect a little bit on the things that maybe you circled a few things that you want to, learn more about, or you checked a few things that you think, hey, I need to brush up on what this is for my particular state. And in some ways, then the derivative question from that is, how can NASBE, be of service to you? Right now, what we're going to do, and I think I'm going to turn this over to somebody else to sort of explain the process, but we're going to break you up into breakout rooms. We're going to be there. It is now 3:25. We're going to go till 3:50 for about 25 minutes. We will ask you, part of this is to get to know your liaisons. There are staff members at NASBE that are assigned to the different areas, know who they are. In some cases, the area director, which is a sitting board member who is part of our board of directors that is assigned to your geographic area, those individuals will be present as part of the conversation. It will cover some information about NASBE, our mission statement, some of our foundational documents, some of our publications, our meetings, our conferences, and those kinds of things. And then there'll be a little bit of time to reflect on any unanswered questions that you might have. They'll talk a little bit about our services. And then we will then come back to this main room at 10 minutes till the top of the hour. I will talk you through the process of electing the new member representative to the board of directors.
But I think we'll go ahead and get started. Otherwise, other states can join the fun and the party that's in the West. I'm Abby Potts. I am Director of Strategic Initiatives and Planning here at NASBE. And I do have a bunch of slides to go through, but I love this particular meeting, the New Member Institute, because it gives us an opportunity to get to know you as state board members and the people that we serve at NASBE. So I'd love to kick us off just by doing a round of introductions, but I have a challenge for you. And that's a challenge to keep it brief. We're going to ask you to do 3 things with no more than 3 words each. The first is going to be to tell me your why. Why did you decide to say yes when someone asked you to become a state board member? See if you can do that in less than 3 words. Second thing I want you to share with us all, if you can, is to celebrate one of your strengths. Maybe on your worksheet, there's something that you circled, that you double checked, that you double checked, that you triple checked. That's a strength that you're bringing to the table as a state board member. If you could share that with us too. And the last thing is, what's one area where you want to learn over the next year? Maybe that was something that you did circle on the screen as an area and opportunity for growth. So that's 3 words to describe your why, One, strength to celebrate your strength that you're bringing to the table for education policy for kids. And the third one area to grow. How can we help you over the next year? And I'll go first. I'm going to introduce myself and give Sharon an opportunity. So if you're like me, I just terrified you. I'm going to call on you and ask you to speak at a particular meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself and have Sharon introduce ourselves. And you can take that time. Our bios are on the website, so you can take that time to figure out what you want to share. But like I said, I'm Abby with NASBE. And yes, that does rhyme, and that gives me a smiley today when I go to work. But I came to NASBE from the U.S. Department of Education, where I worked on a variety of projects under the Bush administration and the Obama administration. My passion, why I love to do this work, is not only to serve state board members, but also to look at research and evidence about what works for kids and help state policy implement that. Now, Sharon is also our Director of Governance and Operation. But Sharon, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Sharon Ken, and I've been with NASBE since 2014 and came from several other education nonprofits. My favorite part of this job is getting to know our members, and especially at our meetings. You all are real heroes to me. Thank you for what you do.
And Janet, can I turn to you as our chair?
Yes, I'm unmuted. You can turn to me. Why all those years ago did I get involved in education? I had been involved for many years in PTA, but my 3 words would be dyslexic son with a high IQ. So I had a gifted dyslexic child. So he didn't qualify for anything they had. And education was a huge trial for him, because most dyslexic kids don't have that associated high level IQ where he could mask a lot of his disability. So trying to help him and other kids like him. Strength.
Oh, go ahead.
My strength would be, I'm a great organizer. I organized with NASBE's help a public comment process for the Utah State Board. I wrote the state board's first set of bylaws. I did the state board's first new board member training and implemented that training over a period of years. And then area of growth, what I would like to see to have happen and what I'd like to focus on is more member engagement in NASBE. Like Abby, it's my joy to meet state board members from across the country. They are fascinating. They are the best people in the world, and the opportunity to engage with them is priceless.
Excellent. Jenny, I'm unfortunately going to call on you next because you were the brave soul that opened up our questions earlier. So fabulous.
Thank you. I'll do my 3. So my why in 3 words is that kids should read. My strengths, I think, are collaboration, ESA, which stands for Empowerment Scholarships, and parents. And my 3 for areas to grow are board roles and operations.
Thank you for sharing, Jenny. Thank you. All right, let's maybe jump to a different state. Lauren from Hawaii, would you like to share your whys?
Hi, aloha, everybody. I'd say the power of education and you can add to transform lives, et cetera, et cetera. My strength is strategic planning, and I like data. And the area I'd like to grow in is assessing progress.
Excellent, thank you, thank you. Catherine, do you think you could share with us? If you need another minute, that's perfectly fine too.
It'll probably change next week. You know, there's so much to learn and grow in this opportunity and role. So my 3 whys are kids, opportunity, and excellence. My strength is deep knowledge in policy. So policy is a strength. And then I think learn over the next year just how we assess assessment. So one of our roles and responsibilities, the state accountability system and our state standards. So how do you assess that excellence will be something I look forward to learning about.
Excellent, thank you for sharing. Ken from Hawaii, would you like to share with us?
Sure. I retired from the department after 42 years. So I've was in the Department of Education in Hawaii for 42 years as a educational assistant, teacher, administrator, and then finally in a state office. So my hopefully strength is budget, because that was my last workplace. So hopefully I can provide, some expertise to the board members as far as a budget area. I think what I want or what I'd like to see or support would be to try to provide, a positive impact.
Thank you. All right, now moving across my screen, Jackie, would you like to share?
Of course.
Thank you.
My why is always to broaden the educational landscape. So the 3 words: broaden educational landscape. I say this because I have so many people that I meet in educational leadership. They have one small, this is all they care about. Okay. And when people come to me, they're always their small part. But if we can bring those parts together and connect them and stop the anger and the tone, again, that's where I'm at right now. That's all there is right now: emotion, tone, and digging in, and nobody wanting to listen to the other person. All right. So I want to help broaden the landscape, to help everybody see the big picture, even everyone else's picture. My strength is because I've been a teacher on the teacher end, on the principal end, and on director of career and technical education. It's easier for me to listen. And I don't have a specific agenda on education, except that students learn and they become good citizens and they live to their potential. Okay. So listening and getting in getting everybody to see the big picture. That's what I would say that's one of my strengths. Just making people feel validated, so that they can talk more, so that we can move forward. And I know that sounds quirky, but that, I'm going to tell you, as a board member, what I found out, that I've done more listening as a county superintendent. Okay, I do a lot of listening with citizens, but now where I'm at, exponentially. And so you have to learn how to do this and just take it in and ask good questions. And the last thing, I think my strength is asking good questions. You'll hear me, I'll ask, but why do you feel like that? Will help me to understand why are you so angry, or what do you know? Because that's the glue that brings organizations together. So I think my growing strength, I don't have it to a T yet, but asking the right questions to validate people so that they can talk more and bring those walls of defense down some.
So that aligns so much with a NASBE publication that we deliver called The Power of the Question, and board members questions to ask in their meeting, or questions to ask with constituents about education policy. All right, now, and please forgive me if I mispronounce his name. Kenyon, do you want to share with us?
Hi, Kenyon. I'm not a board member though. I'm board staff.
That's okay. You decided to take a job to help serve kids. Let's hear about why.
Yeah, and I can share why. So the 3 words are systems, service, future. So hopefully they're self-explanatory. A strength that I have, is one of our former board members put it, is the annoying details. So, and an area of growth would be, I'd like to improve how we onboard our board members, hence the attending of the new member institute this year. I went last year too, but I know that you folks are going to change it around. So I kind of wanted to see how things changed.
Well, great. And you can help us figure out how we can make it even better next year too. All right. And now, McKenna, do you want to share with us too?
Aloha mai kako, Makana McClellan from Hawaii. My why in 3 words: access quality education. as well as obviously my 3 keiki. Not that it's about my children, it's about all children, but that's my personal why for much of life. Strengths, communication, collaboration, identifying areas of opportunity. And then I'm going to actually steal ish from Jenny because I liked her areas of growth, because I kako'o and agree, which is board roles and operations. Mahalo.
Excellent. Well, that's what the point of this introduction game was, to try to get to know each other, and we already have some connections made. So check that box. Good job. Thank you all. Now, I think my task is to share with you a little bit about NASBE, but I just have to say thank you for sharing with me and with Sharon and the whole team here about your why to come to this great job as the State Board of Education, and ways that we can help you and the strengths that you're bringing to the table. That just was powerful information to be able to be a part of. So thank you. Now I'm going to attempt to share my screen, which usually works 90% of the time, but sometimes there's always a little bit of a glitch. So here we go. So I am trying to share my screen, and let's see here. Let me move that out. There we go. Let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger for y'all too. All right, so thumbs up if you can see it okay. Excellent, thank you all. So this is our 4 areas, and of course we have our area directors that are assigned from the NASBE team. We have 2 for each area. I'm Abby, you met Sharon. We are assigned to the Western area. I also serve the Great South too, so I'm in the purple and the red area too. You can definitely reach out to us at any time with questions that you have. We can help you connect to other board members in your area, and we also track what's happening in state boards within our areas to try to make connections between state boards that may be grappling with a similar topic, or success stories that we can share with each other. NASBE's mission and our goal for the organization as a whole, oops, sorry about that, is to develop and support and empower the citizen leaders on state boards of education to strengthen public education systems. I heard that system word a lot in our introduction. So students of all backgrounds and circumstances are prepared to succeed in school, work, and life. And we're guided by this mission in a lot of our work, but the foundation for much of our work is around 2 documents. One is our strategic plan, the other is our public education position. So our strategic plan sets out our goals and our priorities for us as an organization, but at the heart of it, it's about our members and our mission. It's about making sure that the NASBE organization is member-driven and member-led. And that follows right in suit with our public education positions, which are written for and by state board members. And they include such positions on state governance and positions on education policy. In fact, the Committee of State Board Members is really looking at issues of educated workforce and school leadership over the past year, and is working on making sure that those positions are relevant to state board members and reflective of all the diverse contexts that board members have out there. And these guide our organization both for advocacy purposes as well as what projects we take on and what support we offer. At any time, too, you can definitely stop me if you have a question. But as Paolo had mentioned earlier, the organization is deeply committed to equity and excellence. In fact, one of the reasons I became a NASBE staff member was in our interview. They talked about equity and excellence and how they made it an actionable and intrinsic commitment of the organization. And it's a delight to be part of an organization so deeply committed to it. The organization has a couple of core beliefs, and I'm not going to read them to you, but it's about the belief that students of all races and genders deserve the supports they need. It's also about making sure we have high expectations for students. So we here at NASBE, our staff's role is to make sure we're empowering you, supporting you, and developing the evidence, guidance, facts, research, and data that you need to make good policies for states so that each and every child in your state can thrive. And we do that through a variety of different ways. One is through publications, and we have lots of different kinds of publications. If you're a state board member, and in fact, I think some of the state board members talked about the number of emails that you get, the amount of data and information you get. We're pretty cognizant of that here over at NASBE. So we like to keep our publications short and sweet. So we have things like a boardsmanship review, and that gets at issues of education governance, board operations, board practices. Then we also have a state education standard. It's a quarterly publication, only comes out 4 times per year, and it has a theme around it. For example, on the screen is the standard that dealt with issues about supporting students with disabilities. It's a peer-reviewed journal too, as well, by state board members. We also have education leaders reports or deep dive on a particular issue or topic. State innovations highlight and elevate promising practices in states. You can see the smile on my face because I love telling stories about states that are doing great work for kids and doing great work for systems. We like to highlight that through state innovations. The power of the question that we talked about too. Ways that state board members can ask good questions to define good policy, because it's about getting the right information to design that policy to solve the right issues. We also have policy updates, which are short 2-pagers that dive into a particular issue or agenda item on state boards too. And finally, we have our smart brief, which comes out electronically. Now, if you haven't seen it, I have a tendency to talk super fast. So you can tell me to stop, to slow down, to pause at any point in time if you have any questions at all. So I'll pause there for a minute. Any questions about publications?
I have a question. Do we go online to the website and get that? It doesn't
Excellent
come to us,
question.
right?
Yeah, very good question. In fact, our editorial director isn't here, but she would love your question. So the state education standard, which is actually our hard copy publication, it actually gets mailed out to you. And if you're not receiving that too, it might be that we don't have your address too. So we can make sure that we can get that to you, and that comes out in hard copy delivered to you 4 times a year. Then the other publications are typically pushed out through email when they are initially released. But yes, you can come to the website itself. And Sharon, if you want to maybe put the link to publications in the chat box, we can make sure everybody has that. One great aspect about NASBE is also, it's not just learning from research and evidence, but it's learning from your peers too. State board members who are in the same role as you, working on the same challenging issues and sometimes celebrating successes together. We have several meetings per year. Our annual conference is coming up on October 26th to 28th in the great state of Arizona that is well represented here. Excellent. We are very excited about this upcoming conference. It's our first return to in-person conferences for the annual conference. We had a face-to-face meeting at our legislative conference. And you saw Patty from Nebraska earlier in the day. And one of the things that you didn't know about Patty is she chairs our conference planning committee. And we put out a call for proposals for the conference planning committee, asking folks about what are the issues, the great research, the great evidence, the great work going on in states that we should highlight at our annual conference. And wowzers, did we get a plethora of response. So I am very excited about this upcoming conference. We're going to have some fabulous sessions at this conference. We're not making decisions on sessions until August 5th, but we'll be releasing an agenda shortly thereafter. But there are some wonderful proposals in stock for y'all. We also have a legislative conference that typically occurs in Washington, D.C. And it's a great opportunity to learn about what's on the federal agenda, what's on the horizon that's going to be impacting the education policy landscape. But I also love the legislative conference because it's not just about the federal agenda. In my opinion, the best federal policy comes from exemplary state policy. So it's also an opportunity to have state policymakers talk with face-to-face and representatives from the Hill, representatives from the U.S. Department of Education to make sure that we're informing federal policy based on what's working and what's not working within your own states. We also have every month member office hours too, where members get to gather together and talk face-to-face about particular topics. And we also have regional meetings and webinars and learning sessions. I'm looking at the time and realizing that we're getting pretty close to when everybody's gathering back together. So I'm going to see if I can fly through these pretty quickly. We also have a government affairs committee and a public education positions. And Janet would probably slap my wrist if I didn't delve into these a little bit more. I am proud to be the staff liaison for both of these committees. Our government affairs committee meets once a month, and we talk about federal issues and state issues that are influencing federal policy. We also have our public education positions committee too as well. And that's a fabulous group of people who also meets once a month to craft our public education positions to make sure they're reflective and relevant to state board members across this nation. It's a fabulous committee that really does shape the work of the organization to make sure, again, it's member driven and member led. Then we also offer a variety of technical assistance options too, including chief evaluation, strategic planning that you heard Fern talk about, board effectiveness, boardsmanship training, the policy and research guidance too. If you have questions, one of the great things about working for NASBE is we're a small but mighty team, but we also represent some fabulous folks within the education policy environment, you state board members. If we don't know the answer to your question, chances are we're working with a partner or a research organization that can get you the answer that you're looking for. So policy and research guidance is a great opportunity to engage with this as an organization. And we also have a variety of study groups too. These are ways where board members can come together and to learn from each other and learn from outside experts and researchers. Winona leads two with regards to our education, early childhood education network and our early literacy group, which I know has come in a topic of a conversation that's already popped up in this particular great breakout room. We also have a student engagement collaborative and an upcoming mathematics improvement study group that I'm super excited about to look at everything that's going on with literacy and see if we can use the same toolbox to unpack the great instructional strategies as well as the way students learn mathematics, so to see if we can move that needle in mathematics achievement for kids. We also have a teacher licensure collaborative. And again, talking fast, trying to roar through these particular slides. So I'm going to pause there and say, any questions or clarifications? And I'll stop the screen share. About NASBE or about anything that you heard today, we'd be delighted to take any questions that you may have or give us work. Tell us something that you want to have a question answered and have not. Yes, please. Jackie, go ahead.
In reference to the study groups and networks, to find out more information about the groups or maybe be becoming part of the group, all I'd have to do is basically contact. These are the contacts. Okay.
Exactly. Yes, you can email them directly, and we can probably also shoot some links in the notes that go out with the PowerPoint slides and decks to links on the website to tell you a little bit more about the study group or collaborative too.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Happy. And I have to confess, my fear was everyone was coming back in while I was talking, and I'm delighted that it's just the Western.
I haven't given them their 2-minute warning yet, so.
Thank you, Sharon. Well, Janet, you're off mute, so any last words of wisdom you can offer as our board chair and our longest serving member from the Western region?
Oh, I was trying to think of something that might be of interest to these folks, and I remember that I was impressed because of finding out that across the United States there are a total of about 546 state board members. So we are not that huge a group. We are sort of a small, intimate group, and we have 145 members in the Northeast, 157 in the South, 105 in the Central area, and 129 in the West. So I think it's a wonderful thing that we have this in common, and that we can meet together and share our priorities and things that are important to us and try to help kids.
Thank you, Janet. We're delighted to be able to serve at NASBE too. And that, Janet, you just made my day with those numbers that you rattled off too, as well as kind of data and evidence. I love it when a board member asks a question about data and evidence or when they're able to share it out too. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we should be getting close to bringing everybody back here. So
I've given the warnings. I'm not sure if they went through or not. Because we're in the main room, so I don't see them. So when you're ready,
should we text Megan or Joey or?
I can team them.
Yeah, or we could just pull them all back, surprise and be done with
no,
it.
well, I think when we close the rooms, they have like 60 seconds. They have a few seconds. So I'll go ahead and do that now.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. Great. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a good time in your area meetings, getting to interact with some of NASBE staff, getting to better understand some of NASBE's products and services, and maybe sharing out a little bit about some of your key takeaways. I'm going to share my slides one last time here, if I can make sure I do that the right way. So first of all, I really can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I know a 3-hour block of time is a really long time, but I'm so pleased that you were willing to do that. And I know we are pleased to be able to support you during this period of time and kind of give you a little bit of the lay of the land and maybe, push you in your own thinking about what you're about, the things that you're going to need to be great, and the ways that NASBE can be a partner with you in that greatness. So just a last little bit of business. One of the things we have, and it's a great feature, I think, of the NASBE Board of Directors, we elect an individual to serve as a representative on behalf of new members. And that election is always done among the attendees of the New Member Institute. In years past, we haven't done this virtually. It's actually been a face-to-face meeting. We decided we would do it virtually one more time this year, and then we're going to think ahead about how best this can work going forward. But the process really involves getting you all to do a couple of things. One is, first of all, among you, some may be interested in becoming that new member representative. And so you should express your interest in being considered for that position to Sharon at the address shown on this slide, sharon.cannon@nasbe.org, by July 15th. And then we will provide you some instructions that will ask you to essentially record a little 2-minute, blurb, it says on the slide, some sort of description of you, your competencies, your interest in the position, and so forth and so on. And then we will, between now and the July session, we will share some of that information out with a goal towards having a vote at the August, doing the selection process at our August session. Our bylaws indicate that you can't have certain board members, board members from the same state. So there are some states that are excluded from this exercise, most notably Utah, Illinois, Maine, Connecticut, and Arkansas, because there are other members on the board of directors that are from those states. So I apologize to those of you from those states, but you're not. We will find, if you're interested in doing something in a leadership realm, we'll find something else for you to do, because we're always happy when people present themselves to take on leadership responsibilities for the organization. But unfortunately, you can't be the new member representative. The term starts at the conclusion of the annual conference, which is at the end of October, and then it will run to the following end of the annual conference, delegate assembly during the following year. Next session is July 27th. That too will run from 1 to 4 o'clock Eastern time. And we will be covering parliamentary procedure and then using data and evidence. And it'll give us a chance to dive in deeper to some of the key research areas that we're seeing across the country that speak to what great education practice looks like. And then our final session will be August 24th, again, 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock Eastern. We'll do a little bit of briefing on federal policy, working with state partners, and engagement. And then we will, as I said before, do the selection of the new member representative. So with that, thanks again for taking the time today. Keep up the great work you do each and every day for the students of your state. And I look forward to seeing you on July 27th. Bye, everybody.
Wonderful to be with you. Thanks for coming, everyone.